Good evening, good morning, and good everything. Welcome to wherever you are on this planet today. This is Rick and Dave. Bongversation number 26.
Six
26.
on the plane.
Wow. On the plane. And
You're playing.
it's on the plane. And we're listening. This is, to me, Sunday, the 2nd of March. 2025, and Dave's probably on the 1st of March 2025. Yeah.
Yep.
Dave, what wonderful things are you going to tell us today?
I was thinking, since they brought the Gene Hackman character, they brought that old thing out and put him to sleep until Judgment Day. I was noticing that they gave, as the character's known for some movies, which we'll get into, but they also gave anyone who was kind of following the story, because he hasn't really been well known lately. So they instituted kind of a whodunit mystery into the news or the hoax, in order to have the character's work be brought back into vogue or into mind or relevance. Right?
Yep.
So then, so I'm looking at the idea of what did this character, what movies was he part of? And that whole idea. There's one you'll know of is the French Connection, which I never thought was very good. But that was
the best thing about it is the car chase. There's a great car chase.
That's the whole the whole ending part, right?
Yeah.
So they had the big car chase, and I noticed that the first few Rockford Files used to they'd followed that same suit. They had some big car chases in the first few episodes of Rockford.
Well, it sells. It gets people interested, and but it's kind of it's tied these. No, it's not tied. They still use them every time they can.
Yeah,
but that was particularly good. That was a particularly good car chase next to Bullet, the Bullet movie with Steve McQueen.
Yeah,
back in the 70s. Yeah.
Yep, and then the other one was he came up with he was in the movie. The connection, or an interesting connection, is Friedkin. William Friedkin directed French Connection and also Exorcist in '73.
Yeah, wow.
So he must have then left. Yeah, and then between that you have the Poseidon Adventure, which is the idea of a kind of like a boat sinking type story, and a hero. He plays the idea, and this is in '72. He plays the hero. A priest character, Reverend Frank Scott. What's interesting about this Reverend Frank Scott, and the whole idea of these different characters, like the Gene Hackman, who, when you look at him, you see him as a certain character, and they've made him into this idea of the go-to law enforcement guy, the guy of conscience, XYZ. So then he plays this Reverend character, but then this character in the Poseidon Adventure is being shipped off to Africa, right? Because he was a bad boy. He was a so-called unorthodox view, and his unorthodox views were, quite frankly, just making shit up. So he's one of those that, in quotes, he says, "God helps those who help themselves," and people confuse that as being a biblical script, when in fact it's part of Aesop's fables. It's not. It's not even. It's not even part of the Bible. Yeah,
well, there you go.
And what's so interesting about Aesop is if you separate the A from the EPOS, that's a dark force or energy. So it's saying it's a dark force or energy. It's a bad idea, because because that idea, if you think about it, it's not true. It's placing the onus on man to somehow do good or to please God, and thus that's why they're always, weeping and wailing and carrying on and proclaiming themselves not worthy.
I'm not worthy.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy, and they got their butts in the air like they just don't care. So it's ridiculous, but that's the idea where because he's a Jew, obviously. Gene Hackman's a Jew, but what they do is they lead the goy into these false ideas of what their so-called faith is, because people say, "Oh, I'm a this or I'm a that," but then the definition of what that is vacant. There's nothing there. It's like they have no idea of what that actually means. They're just placing a label or almost like an ID badge on their uniform. I walk around, I'm this or that or the other thing. I'm a Catholic, I'm a this, I'm a that. But they don't know what that actually means and what the actual details of that definition are. Because if you looked at the definition, if you can't then agree with the definition completely by evidence and by nature and truth of what's been revealed to you, then that's not you. That's not a definition of you. That's just a label. Yeah, that's just a label put onto a group of just put onto people so that people can be easily, categorized and herded into certain corrals and saying, okay, they're all this person, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, keeping it separate.
Yeah, and now within Gene Hackman, because we like to look at the anagrams of what's in the name, is you have, let's just look at the 2 7-letter anagrams. One, you have enhance, the idea of the enhancement of man, the Gene Hackman, because like the idea of gene or someone's genes being hacked, and the man, the idea of the.
It sounds very big pharma to me.
Yeah, so it's the idea of. Yeah, and then you have the other 7, or I should say another 7. There's several, but another 7-letter anagram is hangman or hangmen. So then you see the idea. Now that you know the idea of the hangman is the idea within the Tarot of the hanging four, the hangman or the falling man in the 9/11.
The falling man that we saw in 9/11 going down.
Yeah. And his leg was creating the number 4. You notice that just like just like Trayvon Martin, the same thing. Trayvon Martin, a Russian ambassador hoax. There's a lot of different stories where when they show the character, they're going to be in that figure 4 because that's the idea of the false door. It's the idea of, so then because remember 4 is Dalet or the way into the mind, the doorway into the mind. So then you have these and so you have this idea of the Gene Hackman. Also, since we talked about the anagram, let's go ahead and cover before we kind of get into a few more of his movies and what this character is what is then it reduces using English, of course, it's 82 or of course 10 or the idea of an IO. It's an input. It's the idea of an input output. So then
1 + O plus 1 + O.
Yeah. So then 82, the idea of 10 or the IO. Some other 82s are Armageddon. So you can see that character is going to he's going to at some point be connected to that idea. Rainbow, vaccinated is another one.
Well,
all right.
Well, there you
go. The Lord and the Way. Now, remember, I told you, I think it was last week we talked about the Lord, the idea of the Lord within the Old Testament being Yahweh or Satan or the devil. So it's like, so then it's, there's always 2 stories being told. There's always this way or the true way, right? Yeah. So there's the Hollywood idea, and that's what this is. All these different ideas that are put out by these characters are Hollywood. It's all magic. And it's thus trying to mislead you. However, if you look at then the different pieces, I look at it like a kaleidoscope or a funhouse mirror, to where it's broken in the pieces, but each piece, just like a hologram, still maintains an image of the whole. So if you break a hologram, each piece of the hologram still maintains an image of the whole. It doesn't lose anything. It just becomes smaller. So then if you look at the Gene Hackman character, what he was put in, so he's put in the French Connection, he's put in Poseidon Adventure as a misleader. He's put into The Conversation in 1974.
Yeah, good movie. Yeah, not a bad movie. Not a bad movie.
So that's kind of like a descent into madness type of movie, where the character descends into a personal madness. And then, of course, the Omen comes out 76, a little bit later, a couple years later. So these are just kind of, if you look at the different ideas of what people are looking at during that time frame, these are the type of movies they're seeing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of disaster movies and that kind of thing around that era.
Yeah, the idea of
adventure.
Yeah, the
Uh,
idea of mind control and also being led to safety. You know, being the idea of being led by a so-called religious figure to safety, and
mm.
or into like the Omen, one that's then coming to then have their way or their time, their season, right? So then you had also Enemy of the State in '98 with
Great movie.
yeah.
Great
Now
movie.
he played Brill. Now Brill was one of those characters who was in it for himself. You know, he
Yep.
wasn't this. He wasn't out to. He was out for himself. So a lot of people confuse
Was
him.
Brill was
Yeah.
Brill the one that was his birth date was 9/11 or on his past, there's a blatant 9/11 in that movie, I do recall.
Mm,
An Enemy of the State, when they look at it, I think it might be his birth date was 9/11.
mm,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And what I was finding interesting about Enemy of the State is that the Richard Nixon character, because that's of course all make believe as well. The enemies list he had included none other than Gene Hackman. So
Really?
yeah, yep, he was
There
on
you
the
go.
list. So that then
Wow.
so then you see the entire lore. It's laid through. It's laid over time. Even at the time that the movie comes out, that's being laid for future use to say, oh look, back at this story. See, it's true because this guy was on the list and he was doing this and making that movie. When it's all
Wow.
contrived, it's all just a grand play being put out.
Yep.
And yeah, now he's playing his best role. Yeah, he's playing the stiff until Judgment Day.
Yeah, well, he's saying there was that when in the death notice. There's three. There was a three. Wasn't just
Yeah,
him. It was his wife and his dog. They made sure that you knew there was not just one. It was a three. The three have died.
yeah. The three.
The sacrifice.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
also had the idea of the pills or the altered state. What it didn't matter what the pills are; it's still the idea of an altered
Yes,
state.
that's
Then
right.
they also had the idea of the mummification. Where that's to bring in the ghoulism idea.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
That's really out there. Really
Yeah,
out there.
yeah. So
That's
and so they're given whoever wants to chase that rabbit, they're giving them all kinds of reasons to stop, but most won't. They'll just accept these ridiculous kind of additions and just go with it. And if you're playing, because you'll notice that not only in movie and TV, but also we're going to get into some ideas dealing with light and light transference to deal with this same idea is that the man, where was I even going with that?
we're
I
talking
had
about
too
the
much.
three and
Yeah.
the three and the mummification and all that being used in the same news reel. You had three dying. The mummification of
Oh yeah, yeah. And I was saying also within so-called science. That's where I was going. Also within so-called science, or even within the idea of heads for head manufacturing, the so-called inventors or those that come out with the patents are from the usual suspects, the Ashkenazi tribe, that type. They will be the ones who put out the actual so-called invention or get the patent. Then those get then shipped to Taiwan or Vietnam, different places where the heads are being manufactured. Even Milpitas, California, where I worked, and
yep,
then then you'll just get the design. But the designs are coming through, and this is where the spiritual meets the physical. The designs are coming through the so-called priests or the children of Satan, or those who are receiving the revelation of the fallen spirit or the spirit of the giants, which is still informing man, which is how all of this technology happens. It's sometimes confused with aliens or ghosts or auto writing, seances, all of this different type stuff. However,
yeah,
man is used to transfer knowledge, and that knowledge is how then to create a portal or a
yeah,
way to get light into this place, a light that's not supposed to be here. So within these within let's go back to the Gene Hackman character where he plays in Superman. He plays Lex Luthor,
yep.
right? And now that's Superman 1, 2, and 3. He
Yeah.
played in. He played in.
Now these were big movies. We're not talking
Yeah.
about these are blockbusters in the
Mm-hmm.
movie parlance. Yeah. And I noticed also one of the characters, his assistant was the same guy, squeal like a pig, from Deliverance.
Yeah,
Um,
Deliverance.
that
Otis.
actor, yeah,
Yeah. Otisville.
yeah,
Otisville.
yeah, and he
Otisville.
also played the guy that gave the lecture in Newton and Network when he
Mm-hmm.
says, when the guy's flipping out, the newscaster, and he says, "Look, this world is run by corporations." I forget, it's the same actor he was the offside of Hackman and
He
that.
was also, he was also the same guy in Profit and Loss with the Rockford Files, Profit and Loss, where he
Yeah,
played the inept CEO. He
that's
played
right.
the
So
inept
he got
CEO.
about, what was his name? He was a great character
Who
actor.
knows?
Anyway,
So
forget about that.
it doesn't
Sorry,
matter.
doesn't matter.
So you have Superman where he's playing, and you have Kal. So then you have he's from Kal, right? That's where he's from. That's his idea. So it's the idea of a place, and Krypton is is it it's an important idea or power dealing with Superman. The idea of what Krypton is.
The
Now also,
green crystal.
yeah. So then, what this is what's interesting about that. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but also it deals with Kansas, the idea of Kansas and Wizard of Oz. Kansas
Wow.
ties in with Wizard of Oz, and he's also where Superman was found in the ditch, right, or found.
And the Green Witch
Yeah. Yeah.
of Wizard of Oz,
Yep.
green and Krypton and whatever.
Well,
It's very
Krypton
important.
now Krypton. Just so you know, this Rick is it's a real deal. Now, the Krypton is one of the noble gases. Now,
Right.
yeah. So what now with as far as noble gases, what do you have? You have helium, neon, nitrogen, argon, oxygen, krypton, and xenon. Now, if you are going to create, and this is what I'm getting to, these different ideas, these are bits, or these are in what would be called supercomputing or quantum computing, qubits. These
Qubits.
are let's just call it a qubit for right now. These are blocks. These are different ideas that if you look at the idea of quantum computing, you have what's called superposition. Now that's the idea where two ideas. Let's take the people like when I say idea. I notice they put that in the comments. The conversation and the enemy of the state, where they're very similar but they're different. So if the superposition would be if those two waves hit, then the sum, and then as long as if there was constructive or deconstructive interference, then the sum of those waves would be the similarity. Okay, then the idea of a superposition. The entanglement is the idea that if I ask you or if I say something to you, I say we talked before about the enemy of the state, and we talked about the French Connection, or the conversation, I should say. And we had already had this, conversation a while back. And then if I brought something up, you would already then, through entanglement, already have several other connections in your mind at the ready, because we had
Right.
already talked about. So that's is the same process in supercomputing. That's called entanglement. You already have these other thoughts that come right to you as soon as one trigger is pulled. So that's what entanglement looks like in the idea of your mind.
Interesting.
Yes. And that's where, just so you know, Rick, if you're entertaining a demon or a false idea, and that false idea is in your mind and you're thinking about it, the entanglement is that every other idea that you or fact or figure, whatever it is that you associate with that, is going to be entangled with it, meaning
Right.
that's the support structure you're looking at. So in order for you to dismiss that demon, that false idea or that lie, is you have to then break the support system. You have to find its weakest link. So it's like it's a self-test. If something is weighing you down spiritually, mentally, physically, find its weak spot and test it, because if it is in fact not true, it will fail there. And then
Good.
once it fails there, you can wipe the whole thing out. You don't have to fight the big bully. You know, you don't have to fight this, what seems to be a mountain in front of you. You just go for the weakest point and it will then fall away. Right? And then you'll move right past it.
Very martial artist technology. This and the way that you're speaking is the same thing in wrestling and judo and things like that. Go for the weakest point, and
so that's like that's the way to think about entanglement in the real physical back and forth that you have in life. That's the same idea that's going to happen in quantum computing. Now you have what's also called decoherence. You have coherence, which is the idea of logical steps being built, but then decoherence is something when a process is brought in that's not quite in line, and it causes a ripple or it causes a wave. That causes then the superposition to change. All right. Once that changes, then it's going to be you're going to then deal with what's called interference. And that can be either constructive if it's of the same data stream or the same frequency or amplitude. If it's it becomes destructive if it's out of phase. Let's say if it's 180 degrees out of phase and it's at the same amplitude, it will quite literally flatline whatever that process was. And just think of the idea of a blue screen. At that point, you just forgot your thought. Like I had one earlier. Remember earlier when I was talking and I lost where I was going?
Yeah.
Because I had two thoughts come into my mind
at the same
destructed.
time.
They were at the same, and one was out of phase with the other, meaning I was going to say something completely different or out of relationship, and then they collapsed, and then I was left blank.
This is using the analogy of the computer that we know of and our own brains doing the same exact technique. And that they seem to understand. When I say these things are being used against us.
Well, that's why. That's why the technology is actually given. That's because it's actually meant for these reasons, And then also so the character, each person is playing these roles. Whether they dress a certain way, and we talked about that last week and before, how people go out into the world as a character. Now then, these characters, like let's say the Gene Hackman, Les Luthor, or Lex Luthor character. You have, and he came out in Action Comics in 1940, so he's been around in the minds of basically male children for a long time. This idea of a billionaire who whether you like Superman or not, Lex Luthor thinks he's doing what's best for so-called humanity versus the Superman character who he portrays as an alien. At least in the early, and when it first comes out, of course that, and then you have a bunch of other, this idea of a billionaire who's out there to save you. The Bruce Wayne character, Batman. You have the Oliver Queen character, which is the Green Lantern, Lantern, and then what's the other dude? What's his nuts? Tony Stark.
Tony Stark, incredibly.
So you have.
You've got now the Elon Musk character kind of adopting parts of him for sure.
And then even in the cartoon realm, you have the Scrooge McDuck.
Yes.
So it's all these. So then you have that same. So then what I'm going to say then is how in the physical space now, like the actual physical equipment on your desk, especially if you're still using a hard drive. Then how the idea of krypton works. Now, krypton it's still used in semiconductor work, but specifically in the magno-resistive head field, which is your read-write head, which is in your, I worked at Western Digital, TDK, and Headway Technologies
Fantastic.
for
Fantastic.
and I worked on read-write or magno-resistive heads. I worked in photolithography and high sputter vacuum. Now, the reason and where we used krypton gas specifically, and because we used argon, we used neon, we used helium, but the reason that krypton is used specifically, and you'll like this, is because it was best to move within a struck plasma, tungsten or tantalum. Now those are heavy metals.
Very
And
heavy metals.
yeah, and then and of course that goes back to the old heavy metal 1981 show. Remember the and
Movie.
what was the so-called
car in
movie?
space. The car in space opening
Yeah,
scene.
yeah. So then how that ties into kind of rather recent past, and it's also one in one of the first little snippets. The quote was, "It was the sum of all evils." This idea of this orb. If you
Yep.
so then now if you think about an orb, there's usually the idea of, and we talked about this when I talked about that drone and the blue light from the drone. Now, if you had this krypton, now if you
What
in
color
order,
is krypton? The gas, does it have a color or a
it
number
does,
associated?
it does, it
Okay.
sure does. Yeah. So if you're going to if you're igniting krypton and it's pure, meaning that it's the gas that you got right at 153.4 Celsius, meaning that's right at its boiling point. So when you get that first release of krypton, because what you have to do is you have to through cryo supercooling, you have to reduce air to liquid, and then you have to, for krypton exactly, you have to bring it down to at least 154 Celsius, because at 153.4 it's going to start to outgas krypton. The gas you get from the liquefied air at that temperature is krypton. It's nothing else but krypton. Krypton's going to burn, or I should say it's going to ignite in plasma as white. That's very important. White.
Right. White
Okay.
light.
Yeah, and now white, because I'm putting this very simply between white and pale violet. You're looking at anywhere from 400 to 450 nanometers. All right.
This is in a spectrograph.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can use a spectrophotometer, you can use a color meter, you can use a spectrograph, you can use a monochromator. There's lots of different ways to kind of to tell you what type of light you're dealing with. So so then there's a specific place then, and this is what I'm talking about, the idea of krypton and the idea of tungsten and tantalum is that this metal is being used, or it's being rained onto the silicon wafer using krypton for a very specific reason, because it's going on to the part of the magno-resistive head, which is actually the mouth, or the place of the head that's actually going to dispense the light onto the platter, right? So then think of it as the idea of that's God's mouth.
Well,
so it's at a very important point of the process that this metal and this gas is specifically used. All right. And
so you're saying it's in quantum computing now?
No, I'm saying it's in your hard drive right now.
In your hard drive?
This is all
Wow.
old stuff. This is the only thing that changes, Rick, in computing is the metal. What's being used metal wise is done. It's like what's being used now is going to be used later. That's all been worked out. What changes, however, is size, and
right.
Your biggest obstacle or bottleneck in computing is getting rid of heat. That's your biggest obstacle. All right. So once you can get rid of heat, then you can continue to make smaller. So then the idea is, I want to talk about what the idea of going back to qubits. It's that they're shown as a block sphere. All right. However, if you take the idea of just taking what a qubit is, uh, just using lines instead, meaning no circular, don't round anything off, just use straight lines, it's going to make what's called a geodesic dome, which is,
Wow.
yeah. And that,
Well,
and
where have I heard that before? Where would I? Because that's not the first time I've heard that spoken about recently.
oh, okay. Well,
Geodesic
the Epcot Center has a geodesic dome, and that's,
in Disneyland.
yes, and
Right,
and
got
that,
you.
yeah, and that's called. I want to say it's called the something about the world, but it's representing. Um, it's representing, if you've ever seen in Masonic art, the idea of the man lifting the veil at the corner of the world and looking out and seeing lights, and he's lifting
Yep.
what looks like a curtain. That's what that's explaining. That's a
Right.
geodesic dome as well. And also what makes up the the eye of God. The universe is the shape of the human eye. That's the
Yes.
easiest way to tell people. So, and looking up at 90 degrees, what would be the lens is a geodesic dome. And
Right.
what you can see is when you're ready to see it, you will see lines that look like a geodesic dome. You'll see it once you see it, and they're going to be a very light purple color, and that's what creates the firmament. That what's called as the firmament.
Fantastic.
Now, then, if you look at photolithography or high sputter vacuum, like I say, all of that is dependent on getting rid of heat. Even when you're creating these plasmas, uh, um, you have to chill the chamber that you're using to deposit, on the silicon wafer. You have to run cooling water through them. And the other way is that you can also direct the plasma or shape the plasma using rotating magnets. Remember, I told you that it's the universe is the shape of the human eye, but it's also a wet cell electromagnetic envelopment. Meaning that's why you can shock your finger and do all that when you rub
Yep.
across the carpet and everything, because
Yeah.
and that's also why you need to, your body is like a battery, so then that it needs a balance of whatever, and that's something you have to figure out yourself on what you best intake to keep yourself balanced so that you feel good, so
Mm.
that's
Very
that
important.
yeah,
Very
it's the idea.
important point.
And each person has to do their own work in that regard, meaning that you have to do the work yourself. You have to figure that out yourself. And then the idea of so yeah, we kind of talked about the different ideas of, or why the krypton's used in semiconductor and head manufacturing, and why it's still going to be used, because certain metals have to be moved with certain gases or within certain plasma fields. Otherwise, they can't move, or they won't move efficiently, or within,
Yeah,
because you're,
this is really
yeah,
hard. This is really high level stuff we're talking about here, Dave. This is even though it fits in if you simplify it with our own human thoughts and our own human control,
right.
how they're controlling us. They're using these same techniques.
Well, yeah,
For,
let me tell you how this is going to work, Rick. So if you have these different ideas or different qubits, and you have them, let's say, in a patch that can be worn on your skin, or one that's on the wall, or anywhere, they can be, they can be any size. What's going to then happen is you have different lights or flashes will then will be passing different information, because let's say with xenon you have the or with xenon you have blue.
yeah,
If you're burning plasma, you have blue. Argon is almost like a red purple, and then you have neon, which is your like your regular neon sign, your red and kind of yellow in the middle, and then you have kind of a white red with helium. if you burned
Yeah.
that. Now, what's interesting about that is within the colors, you're dealing with different enemies, you're dealing with different information. And that's why within the Book of Enoch, all the stars have their own glory, meaning that if you can capture the light, and that's what real so-called astronomy is capturing the
light.
wavelength of light.
Yep.
And then the wavelength of light is what encapsulates the data. Once extracted, then allows you to create a head for a hard drive.
Right, yeah, because each star or planet has its own gas and light represented into
And
its
so you're looking through the lens of God's eye, which of course ends when he blinks. The idea of that final day, the twinkling of an eye. That's where that comes in. Yeah.
I've got a book about exactly that subject.
Yeah. So then that's when it all ends. So then until then you're looking through this geodesic dome, and you're looking at the lights, and the lights, if you know that they are there for a reason, you can study the reason, and with reason you have ideas, and ideas can be put onto paper, and then once imagined, because remember the idea of the mind or Zion is the imagination. It is because the imagination is not the same thing, Rick, as just your random thought, because you're not always engaging your imagination. Your imagination is a place that you go specifically, and that's when you purposely engage your mind into creation thought. That's your imagination, because then, especially whether it be like if it's landscapes or anything, you already have the tools now, whether it be computer map making or game making. If you take the time, you can present to the world or just yourself what you imagined, and you can bring it to life even within the digital space. Or you can do it even in a shoebox, which was called a diorama. Remember those?
Yeah, I do. How on earth did you get this knowledge, back through the Navy? When was that? Did you have training or something to get into when you like doing the coatings and things like that and the computer part? Was that through there?
All that was after the Navy. All that was after the Navy. No, what I did was I left the Navy. I remember last week I told you I tossed the sea bag in the dumpster. I walk off. I tell my wife we're out of the Navy. We leave in a couple days. We took a Penske truck up to San Jose, and I went to Western Digital's open house. They were just about to close. They were already wrapping up the table, and I roll in there with my resume. I just kind of jimmied up, and I offered to him. I said, I just got out of the Navy. I just got out of the Navy. I are you looking for a maintenance guy? And he's like, oh yeah, we got this. We got opening in the texture department. I said, I can do that. Had no idea what it meant. But and then I was hired. So working in Western Digital is where I started, and that was right by Great America in Milpitas, or Santa Clara, which is very close to where the 49ers now play. Now, what happened was there was a new company which was called Headway that was opening. It was a startup. Back then, startups were the big thing. Now, one of the guys.
We're talking the 90s here. We're talking the 90s here.
We're talking the late 90s.
Okay, got you.
All right. Yeah. So this would have been 98. So then, in 98, so I was working there for close to a year at Western Digital, and a guy approached me. He's like, "Hey, man, we got this new startup, Headway. It's farther down. It's down by Milpitas, but we're looking for photo guys." And I was doing photolithography at the time. I said, okay, it sounds good to me. So I went from Western Digital, because they were actually selling that fab to Seagate, which is another company entirely. But so I got out of there while the getting was good, before they did any layoffs, and I started at Headway. And I started at Headway when it was just tiny, and then I stayed there for about 15 years. And
so you were at the crest. You were in the crest of the wave
Oh
of
yeah.
the computer. So literally, you rode that crest
Oh
right at
yeah.
the right time, because it
And,
all this came around that time that we're talking about, the 90s. This is the computer, the startups, the Silicon Valley,
mhm.
it
Yeah.
was just
Yeah,
it
that's
was
where I was.
just about to boom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the place. That's where I was. In fact, uh, I was going to say about the. What was I going to say about back then? Oh, it's
Oh, we're
not too
talking about
important. Yeah,
no,
it's
we're
not
talking
too
about
important.
the whole. We're talking about Silicon Valley and the whole
Yeah.
startups and etc.
Oh,
Well,
yeah. So I did that for a long time, but what happened was we finally got bought by TDK. TDK, which is a big
the
Japanese
German
company.
big
No,
is it
that's the big.
Japanese?
No, it's Japanese, and 100%. And
Yeah.
they bought us up, and then they don't do stock options. So basically, all that went away. So that was kind of like you went from hero to zero real quick on that. But what they did do is give bonuses, which were always very nice
Oh yeah.
because yeah, and so I was up into management there, and then I just there too. I just one day I quit. I just turned in my badge. I said I'm done. And then I went, and after that, I took about a year off, went to the Philippines, then came back and opened up my cannabis shop,
Fantastic.
one man show, and then I did that for a long time, and then of course went back to the Philippines, then went to Florida. I did I did gel coating. That's where I did gel coating. In Florida is where I did gel coating on Sea Rays, which are big yachts. I
Yeah.
gel coated the hulls.
This is alchemy of a different level. All
Oh
the
yeah.
stuff, isn't it? Yeah. It's
NMKP.
electro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is all of these different things are alchemy, and in
Yeah.
fact, let's jump back. Let's get back to the idea of krypton.
Yeah.
Is that you're dealing not only but you can identify then the white light at I'm going to place right at 400 440 nanometers, right in that range. That's exactly where it should be. 4 plus 4 is 8. The idea, so then that's the idea of a gate
Yes.
or a place uh, to magnify is a better way to say it, because you can never get to the bottom of you can't get to the bottom of it. You can only get to the next level. So that's an entry point though to get to the next place for you to then expand and look. And that's what the whole idea with what CERN and what some of those other smaller ones are actually doing. They're not doing a lot of what's being put out because most people don't understand this. But what they're doing is in fact colliding light and making light either smash into a target of a certain metal or a
What do
certain
you think about so CERN? There's one in America, isn't there? Or there's more than one in America, I do believe.
yeah, well,
The colliding.
I did one on I created one on my computer as a physics model. It's all theoretical, but it's also anything theoretical you can put into practice. So
Yeah.
what you're asking what CERN is? What CERN is exactly this. It's speeding up light and then crashing it either into another
Into
beam of
itself.
light or into a target. Now,
Right.
what a target is a target is just like when I was telling you about making semiconductors or heads. Your the plasma. The reason that you create these plasmas with this gas and this metal is that you're actually pulling that metal from the target and raining it through the plasma onto the wafer. That's how you get it in such a thin layer. Otherwise, none of this would be possible.
Mm.
And so then if you hit then a certain frequency of light into a target, you're looking for the reflection. Within the reflection, in that gap I just told you about, you're going to find something. What you're looking for is whatever it's going to be. So that's why all these different planets and stars have different powers that they're associated with. They're
Right.
associated with war. If they're associated with war, what you're going to get from that gap is war materials. how to build a better this, how to build a better that. If you're looking at one that's assigned to love or this, that, or the other thing, you might get another romantic novel, romantic script. That's why you have certain authors that have a corner on the market. A corner is the idea of a wedge. And if you have a corner on the market, you're sucking up all this light. That's why you have certain authors that are known for this type of output, and that's it. You have a bunch of others that are just has-beens, but you have
Jackie Collins in the 70s, for instance.
Yeah. So then that character is in league or in tune with that gap, because there's a lot of gaps I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about, there's on each and every possible human so-called interest, there's going to be a gap that if the person, if they work towards that gap and they get there, that demon, that light will impart to them the certain information. They will become the go-to guy for that. You'll have
that subject, and
that subject, and you see them all. And they all look like clowns, though. They're made, and whether it be deGrasse Tyson or the other guy, the atheist guy who always wears a bow tie, or if they're YouTube characters, you'll see Dawkins. You'll see that their character, the way that they present themselves to the audience, changes into being that of a clown. So they'll present themselves in a clownish way, which is the first clue to the person watching them that if they don't take themselves seriously, then why are you going to take them seriously?
Yeah, well, I would say that you got two there. deGrasse Tyson has to be a made-up name, and Dawkins, where you got the dork into the straight away in the name.
Mm-hmm.
But these are two very influential people to a lot of the planet at the moment.
Let me tell you about this other. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying it's just incredible that these two guys are the people I have to deal with in real life will cite those two guys all the time.
Yeah, but that's because they've allowed themselves,
and they're clown-like.
They've allowed themselves to lap dance another dude to be that's their daddy. So it's like that's literally their spiritual daddy. Can you imagine that Neil deGrasse Tyson is your daddy, wearing that freaking ridiculous vest, that Masonic vest? So what I was going to say was, now what was I going to say before that? Oh, I wanted to, the idea of that gap is also one that is shown in the movie Star Wars, and it's at the very end. It's, remember when he's talking about shooting womp rats in Beggar's Canyon? And the fat guy, he's like, well, stay on target. They send in the fat guy first, and he's like, his jowls are basically, wobbling the old. What were they flying?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
The T-16s. Yeah, the T-16s are the T-7s. You see that? Or the 27s, the 7+7.
Number 9.
Yeah, number 9 as well. The idea of an idol. So then, so they shoot that, boom, and then so that's the idea of also that idea of the gap, is meaning that Death Star, so-called, had only that one weakness, and that was that you find the gap. That is where there's the so-called white light, or that's where there's less
the krypton.
There's also less. Yeah, there's less because there's never going to be perfect silence, but there'll be less destructive interference, and there'll be more constructive interference.
Was the garbage chute? Was it the garbage chute in the end?
Yeah. The poof chute. Yeah, the old third eye.
Interesting. Actually, that makes a lot of sense now that you bring that up.
Yeah. So
you tie those three things. You tie those three things together. So done it again, Dave. You've done it again. Another little link just popped into my head.
Yeah, and I was also thinking, Rick, that this whole idea then too, it's always splitting the man in two. Because if you go to the Krypton and you go to the Kansas idea with the Wizard of Oz, where where the tie-in together, the Tin Man tie-in, but also you
Yep.
have the Dust in the Wind tie-in in 1977. You have Kansas come out with Dust in the
The
Wind.
band, Dust in the
Yeah,
Wind. Yeah, yeah, I remember
uh,
that very well.
Point of No Return is the
What an
name of the.
return
Okay,
album.
what's interesting about that then is that is the lie that's told by Ecclesiastes 3:20. The idea, because remember in the Old Testament they're following Yahweh or Satan, to where he says all go to the same place, all come from the dust, and all will return to the dust. However, that's, remember we talked about last week, that's the Genesis 2:4 story where he's making the goy out of the dust. It's not the Genesis 1 story where man and woman are made separately, because in
The
the
Golem.
Genesis, yeah,
The
the
Golem.
Golem in Genesis 2:4, the woman is made from the rib of the man, meaning that so then you see that it's a completely different setup. So then these Les Luthor characters, the Gene Hackman, the idea of the enhancement or the hangman, it's always the choice between the truth and the fiction.
Yeah.
It's always the choice between the Hollywood. Are you going to watch it just wave again in your face and get confused by the light?
Well, again, just simplifying it, the Hollywood is the
Yeah.
wizard's wand, or
Yeah.
so yeah.
What's very interesting about the Pantages Theater, where that's the one I put, it's in Hollywood, and it's where I was saying that Gene Hackman was going to play the Stiff. He's that's at 900-28, so 90028 as a zip code. That's a 19 or a metonic cycle idea, and thus it's the idea of a house. It's a house of inputs and outputs, meaning that it's a house that if it's played here, then it can play anywhere. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it played there, so then you're going to have all these different lower level, drama troupes playing these different plays. Thus, that's how these ideas spread, because
Yeah.
you make up a place and you give it this false pageantry or this idea of influence, and then whatever then they produce, the copycats will want to go ahead and copycat, to be part of or accepted by the system.
Yep.
Oh, and then before we forget, what was Lex Luthor known for? He was known for wanting an earthquake in the San Andreas Fault.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're going to ignite, and he wanted to send the whole of is it Northern California or Southern California into
the whole
sea.
Yeah, and then he also created through a lock of DNA or hair of Superman the nuclear man.
Yeah, exactly.
In movie 4, I would say. And then the idea with him, that character, if you looked at his costume, he had an octagram black star on his uniform front.
Did he?
And, yeah, he sure did. And
Wow.
that represents, going back to the Disney map we talked about, the 8-pointed star, or the north, south, west, east idea, with the 45-degree marks in there too, the northeast, southeast, southwest idea, and northwest. And then so I found that quite interesting as well.
Very interesting.
Oh yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yes, indeedy. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking, what else was there was a couple other things that kind of jumped in me, like the idea of Pan, with the idea of Pantages.
Which is everywhere.
God of the wind, or the wind flute. The idea
pandemic,
of,
pandemic.
Yeah, so the connection or is the idea of just the passing, and we were talking about that through play and all that, as you pass the different ideas through the script or or what the character plays in these different movies, and you can see that the character, just if you go down through the list, he's just playing quite literally a role.
Same.
Yeah, that will just give comfort to the viewer. They kind of already know what they're going to see.
So Hackman played in a lot of big conspiracy movies, like
Yeah.
particularly the Enemy of the State. But the Conversations, another one,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
and he became the good guy that was a rebel, that was going to come and save you. You went to, if you were being persecuted by the government, Gene Hackman was the guy that was going to save you.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at a different series which takes place. It's called Dark Winds. I sent you a little.
Yes, do talk about that. Do talk
Now,
about it.
yeah. So Dark Winds. I found it interesting, and it is because it takes place in the Four Corners area, which is in the Southwest. It's four southern states or Southwest states that connect, and it's the area of a Navajo reservation or a res.
A
and
res, yeah.
and and it takes place, they put it in the 1970s, because if they did it today on like on the res right next to me, these guys have a 3-bedroom flat open layout with more than a dozen solar panels on their roof each on the house.
Well,
So I mean, they're a long way from what this is portraying, but they're showing you kind of like the 1970s era in the Four Corners area on the Navajo range, or on the res, and it
yep.
follows it follows a guy named Joe Leaphorn, which is the tribal cop. He's the lieutenant, and they have an FBI double agent come through named Jim Chi, who is actually a so-called native Indian from the Navajo, but he went to school. All right, he went to college, and he fell in love with the world, and he's coming back to kind of be used to solve a case which deals with bank robbery. Where it becomes interesting is all that's like mundane. Where it becomes interesting is that the Bernadette character, which is the female police sergeant for the tribe, starts to get hit with black magic, and part of this buffalo crew that which are these Navajo rebels is that they dabble in black magic, and how it manifests. It manifests in foggy memory, in being able to be put to sleep, to where you can still see vaguely, but then
Yeah.
you can't do anything about it. You can't move your body, so it's like a paralysis, almost like a night terror. And
Or it
also,
sounds like what's that scopolamine?
mm,
Scopolamine, that plant that can, is
oh
it nightshade or whatever, one of them that can
yeah,
send you into a kind of a sleep paralysis, or you can be
that that sounds
manipulated to do
similar
whatever.
to what kind of that sounds similar to the plot of Serpent in the Rainbow. What
Yeah,
didn't
well,
he have to?
that's
He ingested something.
yeah, the voodoo. So that's 100%
Yeah,
guaranteed.
with these.
Serpent in the Rainbow.
Yeah, so let me tell you something. What happened to me one time? So what they do is, just to kind of close the story, because I just kind of started watching it. But if you get a lock of someone's hair, that is then the token. It's called the token that is used to then control them. All
This
right,
is witchcraft too,
it sure
as well.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. So then one time I was pulling out of a Safeway. It's very interesting. It was a Safeway parking lot, and there was a gypsy at the corner. So then I handed the gypsy, that's just what I did. I handed her some money, and she gave me the 3-finger, like imagine your thumb and your first 2 fingers making like a little claw.
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
came
I
in.
know.
She came in to snatch it, and she whispered something. And she pulled, and I could feel that she put all pressure on all 3 points of her finger on mine and pulled it away, like she was pulling something. And I just remember Thinner at that point, the movie Thinner. And I said, in the name of my Lord Jesus Christ, you are rebuked. I yelled to her out the window. And so she, and then so she probably, then I just drove off. So nothing ever became of it, but I could feel that she was trying to put something on me. I could
Oh,
feel it.
look, there's little doubt. There's
Yeah,
things, and you just have to look at the Bible in
yeah,
itself to see there's
yeah.
the witches and
Oh yeah,
there are powers that shouldn't be out there, and they do know. Some people do know how to use them,
yeah.
and
This
the
was a
Indian Fakir, Fakir, they're
uh-huh.
experts at that. And in South America, I think it's scopolamine. I think it's South America. I can't remember, but that's what they use to blow in your face some kind of
Mm,
uh, just a herb or a weed or whatever, and it can turn you into a zombie for about 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
mm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I think we did well on this one. I pretty much covered
Well,
everything I wanted to. Tonight's being brought by. Oh, go ahead.
it was very hard hitting. Sorry, high level discourse.
Oh,
High level discourse.
yeah. I like to if I'm going to take people's time, at least make it worth it. You know.
They'll need to listen to it a few times. That's what I actually go back and listen to what you say, because I pick up stuff as I'm talking to you, but it's better to go back and listen to it again and go, oh, there you go. And then you can put two and two and make four, not five, with some
Well,
of
yeah.
these things.
Then once you start to see how then the different how the so-called light realm is mirrored in the computer realm, not so much the physical, the cars and
That's what
your
I'm on about.
place. Yeah,
That's what baffles me the most.
yeah,
Your knowledge of the computer, the gases, the
yeah,
colors and stuff like that. It's all been used in basically in your desktop computer.
yeah.
Uh,
Without knowing this what we're doing right now wouldn't happen. It wouldn't be happening.
yeah,
So,
and the fact they use the word demon
yep,
uh, on a regular basis, it baffles me. But I remember listening to the guy that came up invented the TV. Apparently, he was into channeling and seances and things like that. And all the idea of the actual TV screen, the vacuum tubes and all that, came to him like he manifest. It was channeled to him, and he
yes,
admitted that. He
that's how it
admits
works.
that.
Well,
Yeah,
remember we talked about that the giants, the idea of the spirit of the air or the Satan
yeah.
of the air is the spirit of the air, is the whisperer, is who instructs
The
mankind,
whisperer,
man, woman,
exactly.
yeah, into how to do all this stuff.
Yeah,
It's not
it doesn't just come
necessary.
through,
Yeah.
and that goes back to the all those that gang from England, the
Yeah.
Royal Society,
Hmm.
and they admit they were out there channeling, and angels were giving them this language. This is 300 or whatever years ago, whatever. Um, Channeling and getting this, listening to the whispers and getting this information is a thing. That's not coming out of nowhere. And when you find out that guys invented the TV, like the TV tube, he said, and the computer, I got that
Hmm.
from. They admit they got it from the ether.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's where it comes from. That's that's a fact, man.
yeah. And you're
That's
discussing
a
the colors like krypton and the white light of krypton. So it's not green; it's white.
No, it's white. Yeah. Oh, let me tell you also about kind of what when I first watched that movie, Rick. Do you remember when he goes to his fortress of solitude and
Yes,
and people confuse it as an ice
it
castle? I mean,
looks
it's
like
in the
white.
ice, but
Yeah,
it's but the crystals are not ice. It's a different form of crystal, and I always associate it with fiber optic. Whenever I saw it, I said,
yeah,
"Man," because my grandmother at the time when I was roaming around, she lived right next in Orange County, very close to Disneyland. Remember, I told you that's how I used to always go there and know
yeah.
that place. She had a what looked like it was a fiber optic glass centerpiece thing, which was just a bunch of thin fiber optic,
Wires, and and the
wires,
lights little,
and
yeah,
the
so you
lights
get
coming
blue
out the end.
lights and red lights, and it would change colors at the very end of the wires.
Yeah, and that was way back then, man. And
That
back
was the
then, I'm looking
70s.
at that stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at the light at the end, and that's when I first started thinking about what's going through there.
Yeah,
And then so then the color of light is specific to feeling as well. the idea of feeling blue, being green with
And
envy,
heat.
being red
Remember
hot.
remember in the 70s they had those emotion
Yeah.
T-shirts, or I think it was the 70s or 80s, or I think it was the 80s. You could wear a T-shirt and it would change color
Yeah.
with your emotions and your heat.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how things work. This whole
Mood rings too.
mood rings, same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, Rick. So if and just also like the idea of helium being pink and light, light to light purple, and the idea of neon being the reddish orange, and the
Yeah.
argon, each having their own specific color and signature, lets you know that they have their own purpose as well. So the purpose,
Of
although
course.
it's being harnessed for an open close sign, doesn't mean that that's its ultimate purpose or why
No.
it's here. It's used specifically in semiconductor for other type of metals, but for heavy metals, you're going to use krypton or xenon,
Yep.
because xenon actually boils off at even at a little higher temperature at 108.1. So everything that boils off of liquid air at negative 101.1. Now this is negative. This is all below zero. So you liquefy air, and as soon as you heat it to negative 108.1, let's say you started at 109, as soon as it gets to 108.1, exactly, it's going to
Yep.
start to leach xenon. The gas that you can then capture at that point is xenon. Just like at 153.4, it's krypton. At 183, it's oxygen. See, at 185.9, it's argon. So
Wow.
each gas has its own separation point.
Yep.
Yeah, so that, and it's all very important to if you're gonna look into how this place actually works at the base level, this is
Yeah.
how it works.
It's alchemy
Yeah,
at the top level, but
yeah, this is
all
how it
through
all
it.
works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating, man. You've done
All
it again.
right.
Done it again. But this is a more for the elite thinkers out there. This is
I'm
not
done
the kind
talking
of
to the
thing.
lowest common denominator.
It's,
Just so you
same,
know, I'm
same.
done with it.
I'm the same, man. It's like
I'm done with it.
I can't listen to a lot of stuff anymore. I just go, I've already heard it before. You're just reading something from a script. You're reading something you got online. I want out there stuff. I need new stuff. I need cutting edge stuff. So you've done it again, Dave J.
Oh, thank you.
Episode 28. Was it 28?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and send the bot out. Have a great time, everybody. And if
yeah,
anybody
man.
heard something, wants to leave a note, leave a comment, feel free.
Do so.
Say whatever you like.
Yeah, and Dave, you're a very clever man, and misunderstood, because you know why they're misunderstood? People just don't get the stuff. They just don't. They cannot comprehend this kind of level of alchemy and etc. There's people out there that certainly do, though. I know that much, and you're getting some good feedback. Great feedback. Those people out there that are listening to this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I like it. It's like, all right, let me send out the bot and we'll hang out for a minute.
All right,
cheers, everybody.
Another pleasure, be told.